Many people here are very well seasoned with Y Exchange, so welcome back. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're really excited. Tonight we have two artistic duos on the intersection of science, technology, and dance. So we've got 4 featured artists. So it's going to be a packed full night, so come ready with your questions. Each artistic duo will have 25 minutes to present, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. In which I'll be your chat moderator, and I'll include this in the chat as well. So once you get to listen in on these presentations, please feel free to add questions, thoughts, opinions in the chat. And when it comes time for the Q&A, I will be there to kind of facilitate those questions as we approach that. So please note, this is publicly recorded events. So if you feel uncomfortable with that, please turn off your cameras. You can also use live captioning on the bottom of your screen by clicking CC. So we'll start with a speaker view for each of these presenters, and then we'll move into a gallery view once we get to have our Q&A discussions. Please note that Y Exchange is co-presented by Kinetech Arts, ODC Theater, and the Djerassi Residence Artist Program, and we're really happy to see some of you folks in the audience tonight. We also want to acknowledge that we're located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, for people in the Bay Area. We want to recognize that they are the original stewards of this land, and they understood the interconnectedness of all things and maintained in harmony with nature for millennia. And so without taking up too much time, we've got, like I said, 2 artistic duos. I want to pass it on to the Djerassi Program Director, Tara. If you can give us a little brief introduction to our first artistic duo, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Alex. So I am super excited tonight and very honored to get to introduce Devonnie Chatterjee and Donna Sternberg. They met in 2014 at the Art Science Residency at the Djerassi Resident Artist Program, and they've been collaborating ever since. So Devonnie is an immunologist, a poet, and a yoga instructor. As an educator and scientist committed to equity and justice in STEM and beyond, she engages the intersections of environmental health, immunity, and chronic inflammation. Donna Sternberg is a choreographer who is the artistic director of Donna Sternberg and Dancers based in Los Angeles. And her company seeks to build bridges and make connections between dance, science, the arts, and science institutions and communities. For over 10 years, Donna's company has sought partnerships across all of those different intersections. Themes that this collaboration have worked on in the past are the nature of the immune system, immune pathologies relating to touch, drawing immunological metaphors between the physical body and our planet and climate change, and more. And I will also very quickly say tonight is also a birthday party, because tonight is today is Devonnie's birthday. And with that, I will turn it over to Donna and Devonnie. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Donna Sternberg. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to talk about my partnership with Devonnie. I got interested in working with scientists when I first had a performance, and I was talking about, I had been reading about multiple planes of existence through Eastern mysticism, and the person who was videotaping my performance came up to me afterwards and said, well, if you really want to explore this, I'm interested in exploring this from a scientific viewpoint. And so that got me started on a journey with quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement, which was the first scientific project I did with a physicist from Caltech and the videographer partner. And I've worked with many scientists from different institutions and have done ranging from topics of dark energy, black holes, the history of flight, cosmetology, and botany, the environment, and of course with Devonnie, immunology. And my interest in working with scientists is because I believe we come from the same core interest, which is curiosity. I think artists are curious. I think that scientists are curious. And I think what binds them together is that curiosity and the desire to probe the secrets of nature and of the human condition. And so I've been so fortunate to work with Devonnie, who not only as a scientist has been thrilling to work with, but because she is a poet, her facility with language and imagery has really sparked my own creativity. And I completely believe that collaboration, if you find the right partner, is something that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I feel like working with Devonnie spurs me to be something greater than I would be on my own. And so now you'll hear from Devonnie.
Donna, thank you. And right back at you. You know, we're going to tell the story of our collaboration, but I just want to share a little bit more about how I became the kind of scientist I am today. And that really was a gift from one of my professors at my undergraduate institution, Mount Holyoke College. And some in the audience have a heart connection with Mount Holyoke College as well. So nod to that, including one of my classmates, I think, who's here in the audience. So I wanted to study literature, and I was assigned an advisor in biology. And I went to him and I said, you know, I think I'm just here to say hello and goodbye because I'm all about the humanities. And he looked at me and he said, so the study of life, a humanity, no? You know, and I feel like I've just been unpacking that observation with all the questions I ask and the work that I do and the lessons I learn and the connections that I, you know, experience and inhabit and develop. And so to me, you know, it was just very natural to find this kindred soul in Donna, who kind of immediately knew that it is not about interpreting science using dance, but it was and it is about asking these questions shoulder to shoulder, working together, and using what we know about how bodies, whether they are bodies of dancers or whether they are the proteins and the sugars and the fats inside cells that use space and time and energy and communication, little things making big things happen, right? And it is so profound, so mysterious, so beautiful that we keep asking questions and we know just a little bit more. And that is so amazing that we want to do it again, right? And that's why we do experiments. And that's why we make dances. And that just finding that rhythm, I don't even know how it happened. It happened right away, I think, almost with our first conversation. We knew that we were going to do this. And, you know, and I was hoping that we would do it together. And so Donna very generously, you know, just took me under her wing, and here we are. So, Donna, do you think we should talk a little bit about some of the pieces we've done over the years now? Do you want to add anything else generally before we move on?
Well, I will add that when we came to Djerassi, which I was so thrilled that I got to go to the session of scientists and artists. It was like oh my God, this is my dream come true. I'm going to meet some scientists and I'm going to connect with them and I'm going to be able to do some work with them. And as a matter of fact, I connected, I worked with 3 of the 5 scientists that were there, plus the composer. And so it was a very fruitful time for me. But each of us gave a presentation there, a little bit about our work. And afterwards, Devonnie came up to me and she had given her immunology presentation. She said, you know, I'd really like to see if we could do something together. And I was like, okay, I don't know how that will work, but let's see. And I said, write some ideas down about how you think we could like meet. And so she wrote stuff down and it was fairly scientific. And I said, okay, I'm not getting a vibe from this. Can you give me some imagery? And she gave me this imagery that blew my socks off. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I see stuff in my head. I see movement in my head. And just reading her imagery, I was having flashes of movement and I was like, I was so excited. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought, how could I do something with an immunologist? But as she said, I'm not interested in giving a science lesson. I think Nova can do way better than the arts can do. I'm not interested in a literal interpretation, but there are affective and visceral feelings and emotions that are connected to the questions of life and delving into the secrets of nature and how does that affect the human condition. And that's why I think the art part is so important. You can watch Nova and it's great and it's colorful and your brain is stimulated, but you got to connect your brain with your heart. You have to do that for something to reside in your body and in your soul. And so that's what this kind of a collaboration is for me. So yes, I think Devonnie has some still slides of some of our pieces, and we'll show you the slide and kind of go through the motivation for the piece.
All right. So let me see. Liz, I see your face. Can you please give me a thumbs up if you see the screen okay? And Alex too, thank
Looks
you.
great.
All right, thanks. Okay, so this was one of the first pieces we worked on together. And Adaption told the story of what happens when a complex system falls apart, or when a complex system is perturbed, is disturbed. And that is exactly what happens in our bodies. That is what our immune system does. Like you hear about, oh, the immune system, you know, is a defense, and lots of militaristic metaphors of it fights pathogens and it destroys them. But what the immune system really is doing is rebalancing. And if you think about when something on a complex, complicated system is running and something falls out of joint, there is anxiety, there is consternation. You know, there is a flurry of activity to try to set it right. And that is what happens when we don't feel so well, right? So on the one hand, that you could say, well, that's pretty literal interpretation of, you know, what happens when the immune system starts working in our bodies. On the other hand, seeing human bodies negotiate that uncertainty on the stage, right? That sets our hearts racing a little bit faster. We worry about the resolution. We long for it. We learn to be patient when it doesn't come, but we keep hope alive and wait, right? And that is kind of where our first collaboration started. Donna, did you want to say more about Adaption?
Yeah, so Devonnie gave me a kind of rundown of the different processes that the immune system goes through. And I picked out certain words that were movement words for me, like recognizing patterns, disturbances, responsiveness, a relay, a recruit, a resolve, a rebuild, a restore, a remember. And all of these key words helped me to figure out how I was going to structure the movement and how that could convey this in a like non-literal sense. But starting off with a pattern that became disturbed, that then was responded to, that then was somehow restored, and then the memory of that pattern, how was that remembered? So that was the structure of the actual dance that was the result of adaptation. I mean, that became adaptation. So that's how we put that together.
You know, and we sort of realized as we went along that, you know, we were year by year with this show that Donna really catalyzed and manifested into being called Awe and Wonder, where we, you know, she invites choreographers, scientists, pairs to play together and produce a piece, right? This has happened now for several years, and as Donna and I, we've worked together each year, and then there are new folks every year joining, usually just one-off. So we kind of realized that we are exploring. It's like we're writing chapters of a book together, and And when it came time to think about chapter 2, one of the ideas that we played around with is this very important reality of our existence as humans, is that we are not individuals, we are ecosystems. Without, you know, all the bacteria in our guts and the fungus on our skin, and even so many of the viruses that have, you know, given us strategies for life, we wouldn't even exist. So while we may think of ourselves as, you know, I'm Devonnie, I'm having a birthday today, but really in this Devonnie shaped space, there is a whole ecosystem. And without all of us working together, all the life that is in each of us working together, we wouldn't exist. And yet this powerful reality is almost completely hidden from us, right? We don't see it. Maybe nowadays, you know, we start to think about it a little bit more because it's coming a little bit more into the public discourse, but really it's very invisible. And this idea that we aren't really one, we are many, is an idea that, you know, Donna and I started playing with.
So the impetus for this one for me was Devonnie. This was, I think, the most visual imagery she sent me. And I'm just going to read it because it's so poetic. When I read it, I just was like, okay, I know how I'm going to start this piece. So she writes, the dancer has been moving through time in graceful, sometimes violent dance of creation and destruction. One day she starts to feel a subtle shift in balance. Her movements seem to spin slightly out of control. She forces herself back into rhythm, tries to hold on to her familiar fluid grace. It gets harder to do that. The feeling of imbalance worsens. Sometimes she is unable to move, and sometimes her limbs move of their own accord. vicious, surprising movements that she has not created. It is only then she notices that a string seems to be unraveling from her body. It is like a skein of silk looping out, unfurling, as if her being was made of cloth. And she sees that the fabric is made of 1 billion tiny dancers, each one of them now pirouetting, moving, leaping, tumbling, out of sync with each other. The central timing, cadence, rhythm falling apart. So when I read that, I thought, okay, we're going to start with one dancer with a huge skirt, and underneath her is going to be a bunch of other dancers, and they're going to start tumbling out from underneath that skirt, and that's how we're going to begin the dance. So we also work with a costumer, Rosalita. That's our costume designer. And I told her I gave her that image, and she came up with that skirt that you see, which is a series of big hoops that 5 dancers are underneath, and they crawl out, sometimes in individually and sometimes in pairs. And then they are each doing individual movement in the beginning, but then they start to sync together. And by the end of the piece, they are all moving in synchronicity. So that's how we came up with one.
You know, and one of the most amazing things is, you know, Donna and I have these conversations, and we talk about this, and then sometimes, you know, I get to have glimpses of rehearsals, and then the piece comes together, and without fail, the first time and then every time after that I see the piece performed, the question that drove it reanimates for me. I ask my question that I started with differently every single time, right? And that just this is the only way it happens, right? This emotion that Donna talked about, you know, curiosity is a state of mind, but it's also an emotional feeling, right? And when you see the dancers negotiate and figure this out, that tension, that questioning, that search for balance, or that surprise at the unraveling becomes palpable in a way that just hasn't happened before that instant. And this has been just a real, you know, really, really exciting thing for us. So I want to move on to talking about our most recent piece. And of course, we were, our world shifted with the pandemic and the lockdown. And so instead of live performances this year, Donna and I and the other scientist choreographer pairs and On Wonder, you know, turned our collaborations to creating dance films. And our film was Earth Body. And Earth Body came about because, you know, Donna wanted to bring Awe and Wonder this year together into a theme that is critical for our times. And there is really nothing more critical than human-forced climate change that is bringing our entire existence to deep and, you know, insistent reckoning. And she said, you know, how does immunology work here? And how it works is that it gives us this metaphor, you know, and again, it's not going to surprise you all about balance and falling out of balance. That part's very intuitive. But if we think about the earth as a body, if we think about our planet as a being, right? And we think about the disruption of wellness, right? Which is the same as fever, same as illness in our individual bodies. this kind of what is going on a planetary scale. But the birth of this particular piece is curious in itself. I was having a conversation with one of my students who's from California and who likes to go diving. And he was talking about how the oceans are changing and how the kelp forests, southern coast of Southern California, where he goes diving, have been changing. And I was reading about some of that. And I came upon this scientific paper, which talked about sea urchin immune systems and how the sea urchin immune systems were changing because of the changing temperature of the water. And that these molecules in the bodies of sea urchins were like a barometer of the changing oceans and the world making this response, right? And the response that was happening. And so again, just from this little spark and came Rosa's amazing costumes. And I just want to say, Donna's process really brings in her dancers as collaborators. So these dancers, co-created all these dances, including Earth Body. Here they are in the cold Pacific waters. Here is one of Donna's dancers wearing a costume made out of garbage, right? To talk about the ways in which, to show the ways in which our planet is being strewn with our refuse. Donna, do you want to talk about your process and dancers as we wrap up?
Sure. So I work with my dancers. We do a lot of guided improvisation. I give them tasks to do, and then we use a lot of the material that's generated from that in the actual dances. We play around with it, we rearrange it, we put in some of my movement, and so they're an integral part of the process also. But what I also wanted to say, not just the dancers, but working with Devonnie, it has a feedback loop. So working with her stretches me as an artist and takes me into places that I wouldn't necessarily go. And working with the dancers and having them create some of that stretches them also. So they experience their own creativity through this process. And my belief is when I work with a collaborator, if I trust that collaborator, I am free to let that collaborator do what they do without micromanaging them. I believe if they are skillful in their craft, they will bring their ideas and I don't have to give them mine. And then of course there's a give and take. But in Earth Body, what was really cool about this, because it was on film, is we had the additional film editor, who decides basically what you're going to see. So all the dance sequences that I had done got chopped and that kind of stuff, so that if you see the actual film, it's not, you see snatches of the dances, but they're intercut with other things. So we'll actually be performing the dance part of it at Djerassi in October, which will look very different from the film version of this. And of course, it won't have this background. But when we talked about the earth kind of as the human body, I had very distinct places that I wanted to film it. I knew I wanted to film it at a garbage dump, part of it. Part of it we filmed at a burnt out section, because we have so many fires now in California. It wasn't difficult to find a totally burnt out section to do some of the filming. And then Devonnie threw me the curve of the of the
Sea urchins.
sea urchins. So then we went to the ocean. So we had these different territories, which actually in the film were quite nice to have the different changes, and they added a lot to the actual work. But the actual garbage bag was my costumer's idea. Well, you're doing it at a garbage dump. Maybe one of the dancers should carry around a bunch of garbage, and how does that affect his movement? Because the earth is carrying around the tons of our garbage. And so this is what I find so inspiring about collaboration. All these ideas get thrown, and of course you can reject some of them, but some of them stick and they're really fascinating. And doing this whole section with Moy, with the trash can and how that informed his movement was fascinating for all of us. So I think we have to wrap it up, and I will just say that, as Devonnie said, each of the pieces kind of became chapters in a book. And so our next chapter, we decided, was to actually put the book together, which was inspired by the talkbacks that we've had after our performances, where audiences are just really interested in our collaborative process. Like, what? How does a scientist and a choreographer work together? So we decided that we would add a narrative of our process with actors, that we would weave this narrative in between the actual dances that we've created to create a whole evening length work. And that's not our next project, but our project after our next project that we're going to do to try to put all this together. And so that's our work.
That's our work.
Great. Thank you guys so much for sharing with us tonight. If everyone can go into gallery view, we can open this for the Q&A. Thank you for including your questions in the chat here. Congrats. Thank you, Devonnie. Thank you, Donna. Just listening about the process gives me goosebumps. I want to start with our first question, and Wei has a question. So we've got a total of 5 questions here, which is kind of a handful. So the first question comes from Zach. Have there been any research hypotheses or approaches in your science work that had their origin in this collaboration? And I think you guys went over this at one point. Who wants to take that one?
Let Devonnie take it first.
Okay.
Sure. So a couple different things actually have come out of this, and one of the very, very direct, I guess, products has been a series of movement exercises that a student of mine, who's also a choreographer and is now actually a physician in training, she's in medical school, we worked together to create a series of movement exercises for students in an introductory cell biology class, where they use their bodies to understand the insides of cells, which I don't know if any of you remember seeing diagrams of cells. They're very like static and 2-dimensional, and everything looks like it's floating in space, little squiggly drawings. But in reality, a cell is like a subway station at rush hour. Right? It's like jam-packed and everyone's moving around trying to do their thing, negotiating, getting out of each other's way. And then there's this choreography that undergirds all of it that makes us do this thing like a salon. That's what's allowing us to do it. And so letting students use movement to figure that out, that's one project that came, I would say, directly out of the collaboration with Donna. Donna, I'll stop there with that example to see if you.
For me, I started a conversation with a medical school about incorporating movement into the medical school curriculum, because I think that there is a lot that doctors need to learn to think outside the box. And there's also a lot of nonverbal cues that can help doctors with their patients. So I am working with this person to come up with a coursework of how to incorporate movement into medical school curriculums. So that was an outcome of this also.
Awesome. And we've
Thank you.
got a few more questions, one for Devonnie and Donna specifically. So for Devonnie, do you share this performative work with your science students at the university?
Yeah, and I mean, specifically, a lot of my students know about this work. Donna and I are going to formally share it for the first time at Macalester. We're going to share Earth Body actually at an environmental studies program in November. I think I tell them the story of this collaboration to encourage them, and I make space for this in all of my courses for students to think about whatever they're learning: cell biology, immunology, neuroimmunology. These are mostly the things that I teach in my classes, and say, well, how can you use materials? How can you use movement? How can you use things that are tools that might be surprising to get a little bit deeper, to find out what really gets you, what you're really curious about, what is known, what is unknown, and so I share the story of our collaboration with them and encourage them to, by themselves or in collaboration with others, expand their toolkit of science. So that is one of the ways in which I share the work with them.
Great. And then for Donna, how did the film editor choose which clips of the dance to use?
I have no idea.
Who knows?
He came, we filmed the whole thing, and I just said, okay, you cut this however you want. These are the main ideas that I want to come through. You go and do your thing. And I gave him total freedom to do what he did. And I was thrilled when I saw it. I've worked with this guy for many years. I trust him implicitly. He has his own visions and his own skill sets, but since I knew that I had communicated to him basically kind of what Devonnie and I had talked about and wanted to show, I then let him do his thing, and that's what he did.
Creative freedom is the best, I have to say.
Yeah. Actually, the film, if you're interested, we can give everyone a link, but the film was selected for the Toronto International Dance Festival, and it will be shown October 17th at 4:00. It's a free festival, and we can get the link to you that you can register for it.
That'd be great. So everyone here that's RSVP for the event will get all those details along with all the links to the artist's work. So stay tuned for that. One question coming from Alex Benedict here is, this is a big one. How has your work informed your hopes about resolving the issues of climate change? Just throwing a big one there.
That's a big one.
I would say for me, I think that there are many different ways to raise awareness in people. And I think that, I don't know, I think awareness is the beginning of change. So while there may not be concrete change, I think this is one way, a different way to raise awareness of climate change that will perhaps spur deeper introspection and possibly action on the part of people who look at it, because it's not a Al Gore film, doomsday film about, it's not a news thing where you see all kinds of doomsday stuff. It's a different way of approaching it that hopefully bypasses all the intellectual stuff and hits you on a level like, oh my gosh. I get a sense of this imbalance and this sense of things breaking down and falling apart. And this is what's happening to our planet. So I would say it's an awareness and hopefully a heart feeling of we need to start coming and working to bring things into balance. That's my idea.
I agree
Thank you.
with, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree
go.
with Donna, you know, and I think that the one word I want to add to this is that because, you know, illness, it is a deeply personal experience, right? And it's also a communal experience, especially right now in this moment of our human journey. We're feeling that. But I think with that comes though the notion of healing, and healing can be something we aspire to. Healing can be elusive. Healing can be complicated, but kind of bringing that word into, you know, can we heal? How much can we heal? How can we heal? How can we move toward that? And that, you know, making the science of that emotional, making that charge emotional and personal, you know, perhaps can introduce that sense and that space for healing into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, because what struck me was the collaboration between an immunologist and a choreographer, and it seems to me that both of those are by nature collaborative things, and it's really nice to hear the two of you talking about the different aspects. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks, Alex. I want to pass on the questions to the last two questions. We have 5 minutes on the clock. First to Wei and then Danielle, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, it's what an inspirational talk. I love your work. Well, it's also so exciting to see people. We always also work on the intersection of art and science, and really trying to bring them together and infuse each other. And I actually have some questions from your practice. I'm just thinking about like, yes, like art and science, like ocean and land. I don't know which one is which, but the intersection is where the really interesting thing happens. Like all the major cities today on Earth are on the coastlines. Now, well, if you think about the whole coastline, there are some spots turn out to be really, really consequential, like San Francisco somehow is a big city here, in Los Angeles. But a lot of long stretch of coastline is actually a cliffs or something that nothing can happen. So I'm just, from your guys' practice, really interesting to learn, to hear your perspective. What actually made the science and art collaboration work? And more interesting, I'm really curious to learn what does not make it work.
Well, I'll say that I've worked with a lot of scientists, so I have had experiences where it did not work. And where it doesn't work, well, first of all, there are a great number of scientists that would never want to work with an artist because they don't think an artist gets it and they're not interested. But what makes it work, I think, is an openness to experimentation. I view my work as an experiment, and I don't know if it's going to succeed or fail, and that's okay. It just is an experiment. So because I'm not attached so much to the result, I mean, of course, I don't want it to bomb, but I'm more interested in the discovery process. And I think that helps me to be more open to like ideas from Devonnie. When I work with Devonnie, she doesn't just comment on the science stuff. She also, when I will send her videos, will comment on the artistic nature. And I'm open to that. My feeling is not, okay, you stick to the science because you're the scientist, and I'm going to stick to the art, and don't you tell me what to do about my art. That's not how I approach it. I feel like that because that's what a collaboration is to me. There's back and forth and nothing is off the table. She can tell me what she thinks and I can choose to not use it, but I am respectful of what she tells me. And I'm not just respectful, I'm inviting it in. I want her active collaboration in this process. And I think that's what makes it work. And I think what doesn't work is if everyone each sticks to their own and there's not that coming together. Because I've had scientists that, you know, they'll, like when I worked with someone about dark energy, and he gave me the history of from the Big Bang onto dark, and I was like, what do I do with this? I mean, it's just so huge. How am I going to deal with this? And he wasn't open to me questioning him about certain parts of it, like, how can I break this down? And there wasn't any synergy. If there isn't that kind of synergy and sharing, I don't think it works. So for me, it's that kind of just letting everything be open and taking it in and sharing and intermeshing, I guess, for me.
You know, and as a lab scientist, you know, here are a couple things that are true that I know to be true. Nothing is free solo. Nothing, right? It's all teamwork. It's the team you work with, the teams that came before, the teams that are working on the problem on the other side of the world, all of it together. And only then can you move forward, right? I teach at an institution which is 100% undergraduates. So my collaborators are all 18 to 22 years old, right? So they come, they work shoulder to shoulder with me. We work in the lab together. They come with perspectives and questions and insights that would, you know, I could never come up with. And our work is the result of that shared endeavor. And it's the same with Donna. You know, it's so exciting and interesting for me to see what Donna chooses to pick up on. When I hear the dancers talk about, you know, how they negotiated being under that skirt, you know, it's like, wow, that teaches me something about interaction and tension and the give and take. When, you know, Donna asks me questions, they make me think about my work, not to answer her questions, but to answer my own. And I think that's what makes it work, is that, you know, it is, as Donna said, it's a give and take, it's a synergy. And it's also just so much fun. It's so much fun. I love working with Donna. You know, I can have like not a great day, and then Donna and I have like a 10 p.m. my time chat on the phone as I'm walking around, you know, the streets of St. Paul, and we're talking about a piece, or we're talking about a project, and then I have just to have a smile on my face, and that's all Donna.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to end the Q&A there and move on to our next duo. I'm going to leave Danielle's question in the chat. Donna, if you want to continue answering, I think it's directed at you there. That would be great to see it in the chat. But now, without further ado, I want to let's everyone just clap and just say thank you for this first presentation. This was a great round of presentations and just behind the scenes action. This is such a cool topic to explore. I'm going to start getting the ball rolling and warming up my hands for our next artistic duo. That's going to be Liz Roman and Pete Winnewets. Sorry, I said that a little too excitedly, but Liz Roman is a dancer, choreographer, and an artistic director of Liz Roman and Dancers, working on, quote, expansive dances that spring, roll, and fly through buildings. She's been making dances in San Francisco and across the Bay Area since 1995. She is here alongside longtime collaborator Pete Winnewets, a filmmaker, a choreographer, a researcher, and a practical developer exploring cutting-edge multimedia techniques for performance. So they've got a lot to share. So without further ado, I'll let them take it from here. Thank you.
Hey there. So I'm Liz, he's Pete. Where to begin? So I always want to tell people that when I was about 3 years old, my sisters didn't have kindergarten to go to. And so my mom decided they had to go to a class to learn how to be in the world. It was 1963. So my mom thought to send me along with her. And it was a classical ballet school. So that's how I started dancing. I pretty much didn't like it for a lot of years, but there were birthdays, and every birthday you got treats. So I liked that. And if I could guess the right note and run to the right note, I'd get another treat, and I liked that. But as that little kid, I didn't know why they wanted me to lift my legs. And I didn't like lifting my legs. And so it was getting through that. I often would hide up in the dressing room and they would send my sisters to bring me down. But eventually my sisters got older and I was in a class all by myself. And for years, I trained as a ballerina. I never saw myself in any of the work I did. I was in a ballet company by the time I was a teenager, and I loved that because I loved to move, but I also played sports. I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. We were also a foster family, and my mother also took in anybody else who walked by the house. So I grew up in chaos in a big house, and I was a dancer, and I was an athlete. And the 60s and the 70s, I wrote down the technology of the 60s and the 70s, like phones, microwaves came in the 70s, television technology changed, cable came on, there was like HBO and those things. So when I think of technology, I think about those things that were technology when I was growing up. So when college came around, I decided to go to theater school. I thought, why not? So I spent time with theater people, and it was interesting for me because I learned a lot about directing, assistant directing. I wasn't so good at theater because I wanted to dance most of the time. But when I got done doing theater, I decided to get my PhD in psychology because I was trying my hardest not to be a dancer. So in '84, I moved to San Francisco for a PhD program. And I decided to keep dancing anyways, because I'd been dancing in Chicago before that. And after a year of graduate school, I realized I was just a dancer. And so I just worked in mental health and I started dancing. And there was this guy who would come to class all the time. He was a big guy. And he would come into class and he sweat as much as I did. But I was a little girl and he was a big guy. And I saw him for years and we kind of crossed paths. I did my thing here or there. At some point I thought I wanted to be a choreographer, but I had no idea how to be a choreographer. So I started making dances in San Francisco. And after I made a few dances, I thought, I'm basically in a really crowded group of people here. There's a bunch of us that don't know how to make dances and we're showing these dances. So I kind of pulled away, had a kid, and decided I had to go to school and learn how to make dances and get those courses that I learned in theater school about theater, but never learned about dance. And so I went to Mills College for a little while in my early 30s. I thought to break my back right before I went there. So I could barely move. I went to graduate school and took a couple courses, and all the ideas that were in my head my whole life, that little girl who didn't see herself in the dances she was doing, they gave me these tools and these techniques to put those ideas together. I started doing it with myself in the dances. And one day I said, can I not be in the dances? And then I never looked back. My biggest influence is going to be, I'm going to say I was born in 1960. So was television. I learned my feminism from television. I learned musicals from television. I learned a lot. But the big thing that happened to me was there was a movie called Walk, Don't Run. Anybody old enough to remember this movie? The beginning of the movie was all these people walking through the city streets, and they were walk, signs, and people would stop at the intersection, they'd move. And so my idea was, wow, it reminded me of the downtown where I grew up. And it fascinated me that all these patterns of people walking and crossing the street and stopping and going. I don't remember what the film was about, actually. I just remember that. And that stayed with me for a lot of years. But it took a long time before I ever saw anybody doing anything that was kind of like in my head. In my undergrad theater program, there was a woman who came in with her husband in graduate school, and she was jumping around and he was playing the drums, and I was like, dude, why you get to do that? I'm doing Shakespeare here. And I thought, what I wanted to do, my idea, if she was doing that, I thought, I want to do my own ideas. And so that's pretty much what I do. I work from a total chaos theory. I create chaos in a building, and then I bring collaborators in. I never tell anybody what to do. My dancers learn a style of dance that I've kind of created in my process. My older dancers teach my younger dancers what to do. But the biggest part of that is the films that I kept seeing in my head. So very early on, before I brought Pete in, I started working with film. Some I made, some filmmakers made. So before I go on how Pete and I got together and he brought his films into my work, I'm going to have him talk about himself. Petey, take it away. Pete Lewin.
Okay. My name's Pete. My life started at a very young age. Boom, boom. I remember as a very young kid, eight or nine, I would take the comics out of the newspapers and I would redraw them. Loved Bugs Bunny. I also would check out of the library math puzzle books. And I would dance in front of the TV because I was too short for the mirrors in our house to reflect back what I was doing, and I had to see what I was doing. So I had this combination of art, drawing, illustrative, math, dance, all since I can remember my earliest memories. So I followed a path of computer science and computer vision and computer graphics. But at the same time, I was also dancing and taking a lot of dance classes and dancing eventually professionally. I opened, in the late 90s, I opened up a computer vision software company for visual effects with my business partner. And along the way earned an Academy Award and an Emmy for the work that we did for engineering to the community. Continuing to dance professionally. I don't have kids, so I could have two careers. And eventually started making my own work with another fellow. We started a dance company, and I really wanted to create work that included visuals along with the dance I was creating. And eventually I decided that putting on shows was too much work, and that led me to Liz, who would do all the hard work while I could do just the art part of collaboration of providing films and projections and whatnot. And I'll just leave it. I'll just stop there. Let Liz continue, or have Alex broker our discussion, whatever the right thing is, next thing is. That's me in a nutshell.
Well, I think it's interesting because Pete, I saw Pete's work. I started moving, doing only sight. My dance company, at some point, every piece of furniture in my house went into dance studios and I danced on it. And then I would make my husband build things. He once built a 12-foot staircase that was 5 feet in depth and 4 feet wide. And we rehearsed in my backyard. And then I had to rehearse in parking lots, just go and build it. And the police would come and ask if I had a permit. And I'd say, yeah, I do. And they drive away. And it was hard. We had to buy a pickup truck to carry the things around. I did a dance where I built these amazing, my husband built these amazing beds. I did that, had a whole sleep film. I worked with a filmmaker from Film Arts, and we went into the Lines Dance Building at the time at 50 Oak. And we made these really cool black and white films on an elevator. And we put a bed in a dance studio and got up in the rafters, and we spun the bed around and did all these really cool things. And it was this wonderful film stuff. And then I would put the films into other spaces in the building. Like I built a movie theater with popcorn and everything in the lobby, and a life-size film of 2 people in bed showed up. And then the people in the bed showed up. And that was all great, but it was a lot of work. And I was kind of pissing my husband off, if I can say pissing, because he was having to do a lot of work. I'd also do the same thing with sound. I'd say, this is what I hear. And my husband would go, well, I can't do that. I go, well, you should learn how to do that. So we'd have like a video camera with the stereo and then a tape recorder, and we'd make all these soundtracks. I didn't have any money, but I had very big ideas. I'm a Pisces. I have no boundaries, and I'm just way too creative, right? But I can't do it. So I needed collaborators. So along the way, I had lighting designers who came in and they used film. In one dance, the filmmaker went in front of the theater space and just for for a day, he taped everything happening in front of the theater space. And during the dance, there's things all over. And on the wall, there was a square of what happened in front of that space all day. And I found this fascinating that he had created this window to what happened in front of the space while we were in the space. And I loved film. He was a lighting designer who I still work with. And then eventually I decided I would quit dabbling with film because I'm not a filmmaker. And I quit dabbling with sound and I started collaborating with bands. I've had a lot of different bands. And as the bands will tell you, we know when you like it because you dance around. You never say when you don't like it. And I say, well, if I don't say anything, and then I say to them, I don't like or not like what you're doing. When I hear the right sound, I get excited. And I'd always say to people, you have to work on what you want to do until you bring it to me. And if it works, it works. So it is. And in the beginning, people don't know if they can work with me because I don't tell them what to do. So Pete was my friend. We'd known each other for a long time. We'd been in dance classes together. And I happened to see one of his films in the shower. And it was a dancer.
The film was in the shower. She wasn't in the shower watching the film.
Yeah, right. Although I have had dances in showers, in bathtubs. So I remember seeing it and I was like, Pete's really kind of he's seeing what I'm seeing. And so we just started having conversations over time. And then one day I just said to him, you should just come and work with me. That's how I invite people. You should just come and work with me. And he's like, really? I'm going, yeah. You should come and make film. Okay, go. And so I was doing a sight dance at the time. I decided to make a sight dance in my house. Why? Because I don't have to charge myself rent and I could rehearse. And it was going to be easier. I was in my late 50s and I'd been in big buildings all over the Bay Area. And there's a lot when you're doing a sight dance, you're cleaning people's buildings. It's a lot. And they get mad at you because they realize you always come and rehearse, and I only rehearse in sight. So I don't have a rehearsal space. If I'm in a building, right now I'm in a kid's school, I'm rehearsing in that kid's school. I'm moving all those little refrigerators and cooking stoves and little desks, and then I'm doing the rehearsal. So the dance at my house just seemed really a lot easier. So Pete came in and he would come to rehearsals, as would all the dancers, and I would have him see what I was doing, and he came back with film ideas. My idea was I wanted there to be a room where a beautiful big kind of feature-length film or feature-length dance film would be shown, and it was in a room with half the band, because I made half the band be upstairs and the other half was downstairs. So you could see the musicians as you moved around my house.
Oh, you know what, Liz and
What?
and Alex, we never shared the work that we do together. So we should, when you're done,
Show that
I will
first.
do
You
that.
don't understand
I
what
will
I'm
do.
saying. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
it will certainly help, won't it? So for those of you who are listening, you can see the kind of work that we did. The particular thing you're going to see is the next work we did together, not the one she's describing, but you'll get the idea of how we work together. And let me share the screen. Can you see it, Alex and others?
Yep.
All these things are happening at the same time. we almost forgot that.
Makes some sense, right? So that's our second dance that we did. And the first dance we did, Pete made a separate film, and then he had recording my rehearsals, and he came one day and showed me this spooky film, and Pete does really cool effects. And it was all my rehearsal film. And he just kind of made it kind of spooky and scary. And he projected on the back of my house at the very end of the dance. And it was like a portal opened up with the soloist just singing. And it was my rehearsals. But it was this kind of summary of what people had seen, but it was as if a hole had blasted in my wall and you were seeing the dance. And I remember being very interested in the idea then in the next project of how much we would interact with the dancers. Because the other film he made was one of my dancers in another building that was absolutely beautiful. And she's scary as crap, man. She like does things that are just scare you, but it was beautiful. The city of San Francisco, you'd see it. But the film you just saw, he came in and worked with 3 different rooms. There were 3 different audiences moving around. And in each audience view, you saw a film interact with the dance. So in the television room, there was actually the particle dance was the actual duet they were doing that they and the audience would watch on the television. I tell audiences, you're going to watch what you want anyways. So if you want to watch the dances on the television, you will. If you want to watch the dancers, if you're in the room with the musicians and you want to watch them, you're going to do what you want anyways. I don't believe that I direct people's eyes so much as I make them make choices when they're in watching things. And so the other film that he did on the 2019 project was a solo, was in a window. He taped that, and the last film you saw was a big projection on the back of my house of her doing that dance. And he put a cityscape in with it. And that was as part of the outside audience. And then the other film was there a big square opened up in the floor in my garage. And a dancer came jumping through a window and slid down on the floor. And all of a sudden the square had her part of her body from a dance she did upstairs happening. And so she interacted, but then of course other dances came in because I'm hyper. And so, but there were 3 different ways that we work with the dance and working with those images as part of the dance. And because he does effects, and I didn't direct any of that. But it was our way of like allowing people to see beyond what the dance that I made. I believe Pete sees things similar to me. So when he sees the quality of the way my dancers move, he actually enhances it in a really beautiful way. Pete?
I agree. And the science and technology part of what I do is the computer vision and the playing with images in a way that is very human vision based. But I do it I think I do it in a way that makes it very tangible and makes it ethereal and dreamlike, and you're going to project onto it whatever you're feeling that day, which I think Liz does with her dances. And one of the reasons that Liz and I think work so well together, besides the fact that we have similar views on motion and visuals, whether it's dancing or architecture or the film, is that we both are very much rooted in the everyday human experience. I just want to communicate how going to your refrigerator to get a glass of iced tea can be beautiful. And I think Liz does a similar thing with her work. Whether she agrees or not, she can say herself. But we are very much intimately linked in the everyday experience. I also like Liz because, like me, I like a lot of stuff on stage when I was doing stage work at the same time. So I would do projections and have people moving and try to do it in such a way. And I think Liz says she makes her audience choose, and she does, but she also does it in a way that you don't feel like most often you don't feel like you're missing something, because you're going to get a chance to focus on what you want and then come back to the other part that maybe you missed, because she's very deft at not overloading you, but just pushing you to the brink. And I always like to think of her work as being like a party or rave, where someone's in the corner blowing bubbles, someone is in another corner playing with light sticks, there's a band in another corner, there's dancers everywhere, there might be film, and it's really lovely because you just kind of walk in and it's a playtime, and you feel very much elevated by the childlike nature of what's going on, even though it's very sophisticated to make it childlike. And you know,
Well,
we
so
work
for
together
me,
well.
the science for me, I mean, I science and technology, I'm lucky I'm here and I haven't like somehow not gotten on Zoom. That's the truth. I volunteer for nothing. But for me, I believe when I'm making a dance and I'm thinking of how to move an audience, and I use no counts or anything in my dance. My music's always live. It's created while the dance is happening. My current musician is actually my son, who's a 31-year-old composer musician. He worked with my last band and then he came solo with me. And when I'm doing that, I am, how do I say this? I'm just trying to create what like if somebody leans against a table and uses a table, it's a table. I'll give an example. I did a couple of dances in my kitchen. They're both really fun. And the first time I let the dancers be in the kitchen, I put them in 2 groups. One group went in and took a whole roll of paper towels and just put them all over my kitchen. They like unraveled them. And I'm like, those are my paper towels. Why are you unraveling my paper towels? I'm not gonna have you in a dance unraveling my paper towels. They put chairs on their heads. And I thought, I never put a chair in my head when I'm in the kitchen. So the next group went in there and they were jumped up on the sink and it was very different. So I said, well, this will be the group that's in there. Later on, when everybody left, my husband and I sat there and got that paper towels and stacked them up. He's going, what were they doing with the paper towels? I said, I don't know. They thought that I'd want them to throw paper towels around my kitchen. And so part of what I'm looking for is what you would do in a site. I once had a woman in an audition flush the toilet with her head in a bathroom, upside down. And that was great. Everything up to it though was very unnatural. The flushing of the head on the toilet was very natural, but I said to her, I had to watch you get in there and get up on your hands and flush it with your head. The only part that worked as a dance for me was flushing the toilet with the head. So the big part for me is that I see dance kind of like math, and I write things down like math problems. And I say, well, if Chris is going to be in here doing a solo, but then she needs to be downstairs and doing a duet on those. So each dancer is like one number in a math problem, and I'm moving them around. And at any given time, if someone looks at my note, they may be scared and maybe want me hospitalized because they're like, what? Your mind is chaotic. But the beauty of it is that my dancers know in the end, it all works. The timing always works. And the timing, you said it's like human dance, Pete. My timing, I don't use counts because I feel like after people use counts too much, they're counting. In my dance, someone's gonna come flying through those stairs and you have to catch them. You should be paying attention. So if you've rushed your movement, you've got an assignment. You're gonna have to improvise because you rushed your movement. The next night, if you don't want to have to make up a solo, which my dancers are very good at doing, then you won't rush your movement. By the way, you rushed your movement because you were excited, and that's okay. So I rehearse in sight over and over again because they have to be able to clear that doorway or jump to that window and not hurt themselves. And so it's really interesting, the process of making it, but I know what the movement is that they need to do. And so it's weight. If I see someone not really put their weight into something, then it looks like pantomime for me. And I think pantomime is cool, but I don't want pantomime in my dance. I did, by the way, once piss off Marcel Marceau in a mime workshop. He did not like me at all. He basically said I didn't need to come back to the second part of the workshop, which I didn't. The guy was moving so slow. Anyways, so the thing for me is, it's a true story. It's a true story. Marcel Marceau did not like me. So for me, it's just that I'm trying to take human movements and weave it into a dance. And so any dancer who comes with me, will dancers stay with me for a long time? If they want to move on, I go, yeah, move on, go and do something else and come back. When they come back, they often come back with the understanding that they're completely making up all the vocabulary. I was in rehearsal the other day and I said to somebody, well, you need to decide what you want to do. I'm not dancing that for you. Right? So I need for you to do what the movement you want. And then I tell them, when I don't choose the movement you're doing, it's not because I don't love it. It doesn't fit into the dance. I see the dancer as an actor and their movement is a dialogue. And my dances are just about people being in a space together. People are going to project onto my dances how they're feeling anyways. And people don't see everything when you make art. And so I'm not worried that you see everything. I'm worried that you see something. I once had a reviewer not move when I moved an audience in a big warehouse, and she sat by herself in these risers I built, and I thought, oh crap, she doesn't like me. She's gonna like write a mean thing about me, and I'll just have to live with that. Oh well. The review, she said, oh my gosh, I was the only person who saw the dance from that viewpoint. And what it evolved in that point for that person watching my work, she realized, I don't want you to see anything but what you see. And wherever you decide to be to see that, there's something there for you to see. And so it's simple, but for me, it's what's in my head. That's that movie, Walk, Don't Run. Man, I'm still making that movie.
Well,
Petey?
I know we only have 2 minutes left. Alex gave us our little cue there. I will say that I think of not just dancers as movement inspiration. One of the reasons that Liz and I collaborate so well is we have similar visions, not the same ones, but I'll say, I would really like to do this here as a main focal point, or not even say it, but thinking it. And Liz will go, oh my God, that has to be on the back of the house, and the dancers will be subsidiary in a way to the film. And other times it's just the opposite. And we don't have a large ego. It's whatever is best for the art is how we work together, which I really, really appreciate and love. And I love the confidence that she has in me. And of course, I have infinite confidence and respect for her.
I say we're securely insecure.
Yes.
Securely insecure.
And I also see, Liz sees architecture as part of the dance. I see mass movements of people as inspiration for movement. She mentioned Walk, Don't Run. If you ever see the movie Koyaanisqatsi, it's from the early 80s.
Yeah.
And it's people as movement. And I think of trees as movement and leaves blowing as movement. All of those are inspirations for me to be added to a dance in a way that sometimes I find hard to do with dancers, although dancers can certainly do that. I like the idea of film being able to enhance what the dancers are doing and vice versa. Scene.
Such a great ending there. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna lead us all back into gallery view so we can open the discussion to everyone here. Thank you all for sticking through and being here. And we have a couple questions from Wei. So Wei, if you want to start us off, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
I love you guys. That's so fun. And Liz, your class is my church. Like every Saturday morning, I'm in your class. It's fantastic to hear you talk about your work, and I mean, it's amazing. Now, I have two questions. One for Pete, one for Liz. And for Pete, Pete, I'm a fellow geek, and I'm super curious.
Being a geek is like being a supermodel. It's okay to be a geek, just not only a geek. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm super curious about like all this amazing visual tools projection you made. It. Did you create those tools yourself, or you?
Most of them I did create myself, but I'm not afraid to use other friends' work and industry tools, because why create something if it's already there for you to do? But often I do create it myself. Yeah. Yeah,
that's amazing. Liz, I have a question for you. Like you talk about that you do not want to, or you do not direct your audience eye. Now that is actually really interesting perspective, especially coming down from a traditional theater dance too. Right. So yeah. I'm wondering if it's reconcilable with the theater dance at all. Like,
oh, I think that's interesting. I think if I think about theater, I did a lot of dinner theater, nightclub work, dancing. It was the lowest part of my career, mind you, but I did a lot of it. And in those performances, I was often really close to the audience, or I was in the round. And so, or we would go out and dance on the tables. I was in a big nightclub in Chicago, and we'd go out and dance on the tables. So we're kind of going out and intermingling with the audience really early on. And so I don't think that fourth wall for me, it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It never existed. And so someone saw my second stage dance at my house and said to me, wow, I only came to see if you could make something interesting the second time in your house, and it was completely different. And I said, I said, I wonder if you ever look at a stage dance and think a lot of stage dances look the same.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what this woman said. I was like, wow. So your limit, and that's someone, I thought that's such a limitation. So she decided that I couldn't, but it was such an interesting thing. And I thought, I think that way when I see dances on stage sometimes. I feel like I don't like that. And I love that other people are better at that. Like I'll never go on and make a stage dance again for the rest of my life. I'll never do it. And I haven't done it for 25 years.
I have a follow-up question. This is some question actually personally really bugs me a lot. I'm so glad you're here to ask you this question. So, so for me, a theater with a stage between the dancer and audience is a big problem. Like in the past, that's come down from history where you don't have movie, don't have TV. And nowadays people see people performing on stage. The mind does not make difference between am I watching a movie or am I watching real people dancing? And so like you talk about fourth wall. So it's for me, it's like really crucial to kind of bring the dancers, the audience together. However, you have another dilemma. Now, like right now, when we see each other, we treat each other as a human. Now, but as a performer and the audience, you get together, then suddenly you still have to maintain a boundary, have the performer I'm performing, the audience, like I'm sitting there, I'm watching. So that's kind of awkwardness. I really having trouble.
Well,
with it.
I want Liz to answer this, but before she does, I want to say that if you're in a dancer's way in one of Liz's shows, they will treat you like a person and just move around you or into you. And it's and talk to you. Can you please move out of my way? I need to dance here. It's awesome. Anyway, sorry, Liz.
So I'm a barker in my shows, like a barker at a fair or something. So I am the main usher. I talk to people the whole time. When I would sit in the TV room and the film would come on, I look at people and I go, we get to watch a film. And I would do that and people look at me, we'd laugh. And part of what I do sometimes as part of the audience and the barker is teach people it's okay to be different in these shows. So if somebody sits down, like there's always the dancer go, don't have them too close to the door. And I go, oh, okay. But tonight, every show, they're going to sit too close to the door. So what's your plan? And then they would just go over and just say to the person and just nudge them and move them. And so part of our rehearsal process is I bring people into rehearsals because the dancers have to learn to interact with the audience and be okay with it. My dancers aren't rude to the audiences. I'm certainly, if nothing else, like I'll get up and make the audience dance with me into another room. I try to get them to understand that they're inside of that. And it's a journey that I've been on the whole time I'm making my dances. In the beginning, I wouldn't even want to have interactions with the audience afterwards because I lead the dance around and I felt like I was one of the dancers. When people would want to talk to me afterwards, I felt like I'd been in a performance and it was just me leading the audience around. But I think the part of the question that what you're asking is that you have to teach the audience or allow them to be comfortable. Before a show starts, I talk about all the things that they might do that'll be funny or not funny. I might tell people, and so I'll tell every show things that happen that are awkward for the audience and warn them and say, but if you do that, we're just going to come over and put our arm around you and ask you to sit down. And so part of it is that you have to do everything in real time and be okay. But you can't get mad. The big thing is you can't get mad at the audience. Like if someone's not watching something and they're looking at something else, I'll turn to see what they're looking at. Maybe there's something really interesting that I didn't notice that I can work up for the next show a little bit more. So it's part of like making them be in, and you have to allow them to do what they do. But I agree with you that it's a bit awkward. My oldest dancer is Chris Black. She's amazing. She's been with me for 30 years. And she did a sight dance and I went to it and I turned the lights off in it accidentally. So what I said to her after the show was I said, hey, tape your light switches. And the next night they taped all the light switches on. So it was a simple thing. And I said to her, and then I was in another sight dance, somebody else's sight dance, where there was a square in the floor and the ushers weren't doing a good job. So I stood in the square. So I was in the middle of a quartet at the House of Flowers and they did the quartet and I was in the middle of it dancing. I knew all the dancers, but afterwards, and my thing was afterwards, they said, you were so funny. And I said, I was funny, but you might want to have the ushers tell people not to stand in the square tomorrow night. So part of being it, if you're going to be in the dance as an usher, you have to be a part of the dance yourself because the audience is also a part of the dance. They are, so I don't know if that helps, but. Big thing right
That
now,
helps a lot.
big thing right now is we're working on a piece and my audiences get really close. And so we pulled a live performance to do online performance because I can only have so many people in a space. And it starts to get that I can only get so many people. And with COVID, I don't want people feeling that they're too close. And when my audiences, sometimes people get really close. My very first sight dance, I made the audience lay down on the floor in a dark room and turn their heads and look through a doorway. And I thought, I'm going to get in so much trouble. People loved it. They thought it was great. And the people were going up and down the stairway. You didn't know where they went. And what happened was I went into a dance space and I was like, I was not in a great place in my head. I'd made a dance and I was like, that's not what I want. And I was in this space and they were it was called the Loft series. And I said, this loft doesn't inspire me. I said, you guys go in the hallway. And I sat in the loft with the lights off and I sat there. I looked in through the door and I said, hell, that's very interesting. And then when the audience showed up, there was a lot of them. I said, so lay down. And some people had to get on all fours next to each other and be above them and look through the door. And nobody got mad. They enjoyed it. I'm looking for people to enjoy a dance experience.
Yes, I totally agree with that because every time I see your work, even in the class, it's just there's a sense of urgency and there's this sense of like the omnipresence of dance. It's everywhere, and that you can breathe and be in it, and it's not this thing. It's not this performative thing. It's this action that we're doing now, and it's just being present. And I have to just like really applaud you for that because sometimes as a dancer and choreographer myself, and I've been out of practice for a little bit, but you can fall out of love with dance just because it feels like it's decorative. It feels like you're only expected to know the moves, and there's so much more to it than that. So
Saturday morning, I had people do a backward turn that I put in a dance maybe 35 years ago. The dancers didn't like it back then, but when they did it well, it was beautiful. And so they in class the other day and I said, you have to feel this. You're all in my dance class because of how dance feels. I said, so I want to ask you right now, how does this feel? Because it looks shitty and it looks like you don't like it. So if that's what you want, you're looking good right now. The next time they performed it, they put their weight in their feet and the weight was there. And then everybody did it. And what was happening was they were practicing something they learned in other people's dance classes, which was, I don't like it. I'm gonna be a little bitchy and I'm not gonna like doing it. You come to my class and do that, you can get your damn bag and go home. Your career is a long ass career. You're the dancer, you're the instrument. And I really feel that way. And I feel that way with my dancers. And they're like laughing because I really do that in my class. True.
Point being, everyone needs to take Liz Roman's class on Saturday.
But not now with masks on.
I know. Wow. Well, I guess we're at that point in the night where it's 8:30, and I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And just if we can unmute ourselves, maybe do a little applause, give some sound, sharing this space that we're together. Because this is a wonderful place to be in conversation with these wonderful artists. I will be sharing links and everything like that in an email that goes out tomorrow or maybe Friday, depending on when I can get all the links for these upcoming events. So stay tuned, and thank you for coming here and being present with us.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you guys for doing it.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Donna and Devonnie.
Have a good evening.
Presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Happy
was
birthday,
amazing.
Devonnie.
Yeah.
Birthday.
All right. Until next time.
Till next time.
Good night.
Ciao, bella.
Bye.
Good night.